Hello, and welcome to this week's Retroactive Podcast. We're going to take a look at my second series that I wrote back in February. But before we get into that, and I promise it's a lighthearted series, so it'll be fun, but I have to give a few minutes of some serious subject here. I normally don't like to delve into politics. There are enough people screeching online, but this is kind of an unusual situation, so I feel compelled to make 3 points here. First of all, Biden came out and condemned the violence in the assassination attempt against Trump. He voiced his sympathy for the family of the victim who died, and he also stated that the pressure needed to be turned down on all the political rhetoric. Which is true. It's exactly what I said when it was happening, unfolding, as I was recording Monday's podcast. So the only thing I would like to point out is while that is all well and good, his apology was all we's, if you can even call it an apology. Saying we need to turn down the temperature is the way a parent lectures a child, which really means you need to turn down the temperature, when the reality is Biden has led the way in this. He has posted on his Twitter account literally days before the assassination attempt that Trump was going to be a dictator if he got in, that Trump was going to institute the Handmaid's Tale, that Trump was Hitler. The New Republic published an ad that actually had Trump's face imposed and composited into Hitler's face. So when you are telling people that democracy is going to end, this is going to be the very last election. If they don't do something, their entire way of life is going to end. If you were actually living in 1930s Germany and you knew Hitler was going to kill 6 million people in Auschwitz and places like that, not to mention all the soldiers who died in the war, you wouldn't just be justified in taking a shot at the real Adolf Hitler. You would be morally obligated to. It would be your duty to take a shot at Hitler to stop that. So when you go out and you say, not in jokes, not in anything, but in serious rhetoric, day after day, that Trump is the exact same as Hitler, he's going to do what Hitler did, he's going to kill his political opponents, he's going to take over and turn this into not even America anymore and make it where there is no more democracy. He's going to take everything from you. You cannot feign like you're innocent when some crazy person takes that literally and goes out and takes a shot at him as though he was Hitler. That is the way that works. So Trump's rhetoric aside, because he's guilty of the same thing. I don't especially like Trump, but nobody's taking shots at Biden. Okay? So it's the left's rhetoric in this case that has succeeded in promoting this. So as somebody that stands in the middle right now, I am pointing the finger at the left. I've pointed the finger at the right plenty of times. Will do so in the future. But right now, it's the left's rhetoric that is the problem that has caused someone to take a shot at a president for the first time in my lifetime, okay? We had 3 years to go before I was even born the last time somebody took a shot at a president. And now, because of all this rhetoric, don't get me wrong, the shooter's responsible for what he did. No one made him pull that trigger. But when you are inciting everybody to be worked up all the time, you are creating the atmosphere in which a crazy person does something like this. So Biden's statement should have said, we need to turn down the political rhetoric, including me, because he has been leading the charge in this. I cannot remember the last time I saw a political ad from the Biden campaign or a political tweet from the Biden campaign that had anything to do with why he should be president. It's always why Trump is the end of everything if he's president. So take your own advice and set a frickin' example for once. You're the president. And I know you've got dementia, and so it's the people behind you, but whoever's running the stream's fine. I'm talking to you. You set the example. And quit tweeting out this kind of stuff. Quit encouraging the media to reiterate it, etc. As one of my favorite podcasters, Konstantin Kisin, said, quote, do we not make movies about men like Colonel von Stauffenberg who did just that? Exactly. We've all probably seen the movie Valkyrie. If not, you should go watch it. It's a true story. It's an awesome story. It is an inspiring story of a man who was an officer in the Nazi army. He was in the Third Reich, realized that he was on the side of evil, and risked his life to try to blow Hitler to smithereens, and he came really close. We make a movie about him because that is heroic. Hitler was a monster. He was already killing people, and someone lost their life, many someones in fact, trying to stop him. We make movies about that, and we should, because that's heroic. But when you say Trump is Hitler, you're telling somebody to go do what Stauffenberg did. And if Trump is not actually Hitler, and doesn't actually deserve to be shot in the head or blown to smithereens, then you might need to stop saying these things. And Biden's rhetoric didn't stop there. When asked publicly on television if Donald Trump voters were also a threat to the democracy, now keep in mind, based on the polls right now, that is half of America. He said, yes, that anyone who votes for Trump is also a threat to democracy. Now, I've been about as clear as I can be that I'm not a Trump fan, but at this point, I've also said publicly, and I still mean it, I will vote for literally anyone before Biden again. And yeah, in a perfect world, I'd prefer another choice besides Trump. But if my choice does come down to Trump or Biden, I will be voting for Trump, because I will vote for anyone before Biden again. So I guess that makes me a threat to democracy and half the country. So basically, the senile president thinks that anyone who votes for someone other than him is a threat to democracy. So democracy, the freedom of choice for the people, should only have one choice, i.e. him. That makes a lot of sense. And the media is so crazy that they had to pull Morning with Joe off the air on CNN because they couldn't trust their own anchors and their own regular panelists not to use this kind of rhetoric the day after an assassination attempt. They had to pull that show off to keep them from saying the day after someone died in a shooting. They didn't want one of their own anchors or one of their own panelists, in their lack of self-control, to say that it was good, that it was fine, that maybe they had it coming, or something else that would get them in trouble. If you're at that point, maybe you need to consider firing your panelists and your anchors and get some people on that are, like, sane and halfway moral. Or if that's asking too much, maybe just some people that can restrain themselves enough to hold back for a day or two after people are getting shot. You think? Maybe? Second, my second and final point on politics before we move on to other subjects and put this behind us for good, because I have no desire to become a political commentator. A very well-known internet personality who goes by the name Destiny tweeted out several absolutely repulsive things after the assassination attempt. Now, he is left-wing. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with being left-wing. He supports Biden. Okay, I disagree with you on that, but there's nothing wrong with that. He doesn't like Trump. Hey, I don't like Trump either. What's your point? He still shouldn't be shot in the head. That's not how we solve things. That's not the country we want to be in, where that's how you solve things and that's somehow considered okay. For example, the governor of Pennsylvania came out and talked about the victim who actually died, the innocent bystander who did die, who's getting lost in all of this, in Pennsylvania at that rally just because he showed up to hear somebody speak. And the governor of Pennsylvania, Mr. Shapiro, said, that was wrong. He condemned the violence. He, like Biden, said, we need to turn down the heat here on the political rhetoric, except, unlike Biden, he's credible because he has never used these kind of inflammatory, aggravating types of rhetoric to his statements. He still is not a Trump fan. He's still left-wing. That's totally fine. You can point out every single time Trump does something wrong, and I'm right there with you. but you should not be saying things that lead crazy people to go pick up a gun. That's where the line gets drawn. So Destiny's left-wing, but he's not left-wing like Governor Shapiro. He's left-wing as in he's a crazy person. And he's worse than just a crazy person. He's a despicable crazy person. So he tweeted out, Donald Trump incited an insurrection and then was granted full criminal immunity for possibly all of his involvement. I have zero sympathy for anything that happens to him or anyone who supports him. I will argue this position against any and all conservatives of reasonable size, but there's a reason none of you spineless hacks step outside of your echo chamber. Now, that last part he really needs to be saying to the mirror, because Destiny is someone who literally never steps outside of his echo chamber. But that aside, and setting aside his challenge to any conservatives of reasonable size, look, I'm a nobody. I have hardly anyone listening to my podcast, although I appreciate each and every one of my listeners. I don't take them for granted. And I'm a nobody. I'm not going to pretend like I'm some well-known person on the level of somebody like Destiny who's got all these followers. But, you know, when he says he'll only debate people of reasonable size, you know, considering that I've always kind of suspected that he's got, you know, some compensation issues when it comes to size issues himself in his personal life, based on the way he behaves and the way his personal life has fallen apart, you know, that aside, and, you know, setting aside the fact that I'm so far beneath him, to quote Val Kilmer in one of my favorite movies, I'm here, Huckleberry. If you don't mind having your very public image whooped all over from one side of the internet to another in a debate by a crippled girl from Oklahoma, I got 3 words for you. Bring it, Destiny. I know I'm too far beneath you to be of reasonable size to be worthy of your rhetoric, but I'm here if you've got the guts, which I doubt it. You don't seem to strike me as someone who's got balls for doing anything except tweeting despicable things. And what is most despicable about what you tweeted out right after an assassination attempt on a former president and a future potential president is that you not only said it was okay to take a shot at Donald Trump, which is pretty bad in and of itself, but you said that the person who died at that rally deserved to die for just being there. That if he even listened to Donald Trump, never did anybody any harm, but if he even is willing to listen to Donald Trump, then he deserves to have his head blown off. I will have you know, Destiny, that Corey, the name of the man you implied deserved what he got for being where he was a volunteer fireman, a father of 2 little girls, and he died diving onto one of those little girls in order to protect them with the only thing he had to offer, his body, and he was shot in the head for it. And you're despicable as can be for saying these kind of things. And then you tweeted out after that, quote, a person in a crowd cheering for and supporting a traitor in this country caught astray? I'm so sad. Please. You're an awful human being. Anybody that's paid attention to you in the past already knew that. But thank you for exposing it to the world. You really need to take a look in the mirror and evaluate yourself, because it's requiring all the self-control I have to not descend into name-calling and say you're trash or things like that, because that's what I'm feeling right now. But I'm not going to be you. It's people like you who just took shots at somebody, and it's people like me that say, no, we can disagree, but it shouldn't come to that. That's not okay. And an innocent person in a crowd has a right to listen to whoever they want. Somebody that devoted their life to volunteer firefighting, risking their life to help strangers, a father of 2 little girls who have lost their father, just because he listened to somebody that you don't like deserves to die. No, that's despicable. You are an awful human being. You need to walk away from the internet, get out of your echo chamber where you are encouraging other people to hate and listening to people encouraging you to hate for their own entertainment. And you need to go on a sabbatical and get yourself squared away, because the problem is you. Now, I don't hold out a lot of hope that somebody like Destiny can actually be changed or is willing to be changed. He could be changed if he wanted to change, but he doesn't have the guts to look himself in the mirror and want to change and put in the work that's required for anyone to change. I do hold out hope for society, though. There are a lot of good people out there who are actually good people who might be feeling things that surprise themselves or say things that they don't actually mean. And that is my third and final point, and really the main point that I want to make. If you responded to the news that someone injured Donald Trump, that he'd been shot, he literally came within a centimeter of being JFK, and even worse, an innocent bystander who just was in a crowd in the wrong place at the wrong time was shot in the head and left his 2 little girls orphaned, left their mother widowed and now a single parent because of all of this. And your response, maybe you had more self-control than Destiny and were not despicable and didn't tweet out horrible things, but maybe your reaction was kind of surprisingly, deep down inside, yeah, so what? Why should I care if Donald Trump gets shot? I don't like Donald Trump. I'm encouraging everybody to step back. It's not about whether you like Donald Trump or not. We are talking about a human being who has people who love him, who will be damaged if he's dead. He has children, one of which is still relatively young. He has grandchildren. To those grandchildren, he is grandpa. You know, the poor man in the crowd had 2 little girls who are going to cry their eyes out for daddy for months to come, who are going to go to their high school graduation sad because daddy's not there, who are going to walk down the aisle to their husbands one day without daddy giving them away. And if your reaction is, deep down, when you're honest with yourself, I don't care, you need to think about what's gotten you to that point. Because, no, as human beings, we're not capable of feeling as deeply for people we don't know. We can empathize with them. We should empathize with them. But of course, our own tragedies hit us differently, affect us much longer lasting. I'm not saying that we can do anything to change that we should take on this tragedy as though it was our father who was killed and grieve every day for years and years. I'm not saying that. But if you can't even find empathy for these little girls, for the man that was shot for just being there, for the people that actually care about Trump, whether you like him or not. I'm somebody who doesn't, but I don't want to see his kids have to go to their father's funeral. And if you've gotten to a place where you do, then I'm not saying put on a show and pretend to feel something you don't and go out there and act like you never would have gotten over it if he died. It would have affected you forever. I'm not asking people to put on a show. But if you're at a place where you would actually feel like, good, he got shot in the head, that's good, then that's when that should be a wake-up call to each and every one of us. When we feel that about somebody, when we've let somebody become such a big enough enemy that that's what we're feeling, especially somebody we don't know who's never actually done us any harm. If you're somebody who Donald Trump has actually done something to and it's actually ruined your life, okay, fine, you get to feel how you want to feel. But for everybody else, which is the majority of the people on the planet, Donald Trump has never even affected your life in any real way. And for people in America who have had their life at least kind of affected when he was president, he still has not impacted it so negatively that it justifies that. So if that's what we're feeling, then it's time to stop and say, okay, wait a minute. Whose voice just got in my head? Who have we been listening to for too long and too exclusively that have worked us into a state where good people are capable of feeling that way now? We all need to be asking that question, and that's my main point. Who are we listening to that are making us into bad people? Because we're not bad people. We don't want to be bad people. Let's choose not to be bad people, and let's turn off the voices that are encouraging us to give into the worst parts of ourselves and become the worst versions of ourselves instead of the best ones. That is the point that I really want to get across, and I hope it's something that resonates with you, because I think deep down, we all want to be the best version of ourselves that we can be for the people we love and for the world, for our legacy, whatever it may be. That's what we want to be. We want to be as good of a person as we can be. And letting ourselves be led into being the kind of people that are like, good, that person got shot. That's not who we want to become. And if that's your reaction, then rather than just ignore it and kind of go, well, that's an ugly side of me, I don't really want to admit it's there. No, now's the time to say, okay, why is that there? Who am I listening to that's feeding that side of me so that I can stop listening to them? That's my 2 cents. Now that I've had my little fun, if you can call that fun, I feel obligated to say the things that need to be said at moments like this, when there are so many people on both sides that are so radical that they're really could lead to other things. I mean, World War I started because Archduke Ferdinand was shot. That led to World War I. And there's no real argument that you can make that World War II did not come out of World War I. It came directly out of that. Nuclear bombs, all of that came out of that. So the idea that you act like shooting at a leader and inflaming the people who follow him into retaliatory acts is just nothing. It's not your little internet video games, Destiny. Okay? I know you've played too many of them and they've fried your brain, but this is real life. These are human beings, and no human being should be shot unless it is in self-defense of they are actually right now, not maybe one day, but right now killing somebody. And to incite anything else is irresponsible and unforgivable on your part. You need to put down your games. You need to walk away from the internet. You need to get out of your echo chamber. And as I said before, if you want to debate somebody, I'm here, Huckleberry. If you got the balls. Moving on. Thankfully, my February series was on a light subject, which is good. We need a light subject. Let's set aside the politics and embrace the lightness for a moment. So, the first part of my February series is a few of my favorite things. Part 1, timeless movies. Having chosen a difficult subject to tackle in my first series, I'm taking a more personal direction this time. But I have no intention of staying in the shallows by discussing the purely trivial. I'm going to talk about things that bring something positive into my life. Not necessarily something happy, but something that is positive. After all, can't we all use as much of that as we can find? So, maybe it's time to stop and think about the places each of us actually succeed in finding it. In this first part of my new series, I'm going to start with a love of mine that few share, and I assume almost everyone will think cannot be anything besides trivial. But at least hear me out. One of my favorite things is great old movies. Now, for those of you who can't imagine anything more soul-crushing than a 3-hour-long, quote, boring film, at least let me make my case. Because you are missing out on a whole world that is truly incredible. First off, you've grown up on a whole different breed of movies. They are fast-paced with special effects in every scene, 5 plot lines running simultaneously, eventually intersecting, blinding action scenes that race by faster than your eye can take them in, often clumsily tied together by a condescending sermon courtesy of whatever today's political brand of brainwashing propaganda is. And lots of exposed breasts, even in scenes where they make absolutely no sense. To think this is even the same species as an old movie is a big mistake. A modern blockbuster is like a hit of speed, I'm assuming. It pumps you up and leaves you with a full charge of overstimulation. An old movie is a golden whiskey by a warm fire. It lulls you into a deep and comfortable reflection of the inner world. If you take one expecting to get the feel of the other, you're going to be disappointed. But if you know what you're getting, and you're in the right mood to enjoy that, you get exactly what you were looking for. I could write a whole article just listing the movies I love and what I love about them. The Godfather. Probably the greatest movie of all time, with Part 2 hot on its heels, which is the only sequel that actually rivals the first as a standalone film. And yes, I say this with all the bias of a proud Sicilian. Gilda. There is not an actress alive that shimmers with the electricity of Rita Hayworth in every single scene of this film. From Shawshank's hair flip to Put the Blame on Mame, you can't look away. And after seeing it, you completely understand her famously sad quote that all men she fell for go to bed with Gilda and wake up with me. Wuthering Heights. This would have won the Oscar had it been made any other year but the one where it faced Gone with the Wind. And as much as I love a good scarlet glare, Gable's grin, and a frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, I have yet to see acting that equals the death scene in Wuthering Heights. Ben-Hur. I have to laugh at this one because I remember asking my mom when I was a kid why Charlton Heston was so popular. He wasn't as good-looking as other actors from Hollywood's golden age. She tried to explain that it was more him, the masculine characters he played, and how well he played them, more than his actual looks. I didn't get it. And puberty set in. Boy, was I born in the wrong era. You've never seen anything like the heat between Judah and Esther. Wow. Stephen Boyd's death scene is a masterpiece that will truly appall you. And given that Christ doesn't utter a single word during the whole thing, there is an unequaled, beautifully personal compassion in that portrayal that has an impact that can be deeply felt. Anastasia. Ingrid Bergman and Yul Brynner in the tragic story of a lost Russian princess. Need I say more? His iconically singular characters and her classically soft and vulnerable charm in a story that I very much prefer to the reality confirmed a few years ago. It's an engrossing film. The Red Shoes. Okay, I could go on, but I won't. Suffice it to say that in a pre-special effects Hollywood, you were left with two selling points. Acting skill that is rarely approached today, and a true talent in the art of storytelling that they don't even try to live up to. But to explain what I really love about old movies, I have to pick one to use for an example. So I'm going with Spartacus. That's right. Kirk Douglas, Gene Simmons, Laurence Olivier, Tony Curtis, Charles Laughton, and Peter Ustinov. You can't beat that lineup. It just isn't possible. And if those names mean nothing to you, it is your loss. But it doesn't have to stay that way. So, for those of you who haven't seen it, Spartacus is based on a true story of a slave who became a gladiator who defied an empire. No, not that one. Put Russell Crowe back on the shelf. This slave was sold to a gladiator school where he was trained to fight and eventually die. He led a revolution of over 100,000 slaves and took them to the Alps so they could all go home. But they decided, we made it this far, why should we leave? Let's turn around and free all the slaves in Italy and then go or stay. And Spartacus refused to abandon them to this bad choice. This predictably proved to be a mistake. So Plan B becomes the journey from their volcanic encampment on Mount Vesuvius, yep, Pompeii's killer volcano, to the bottom of Italy's boot to sail away. But their hired pirates are bribed by Rome to betray them. As Jack Sparrow once pointed out, pirate. Hello? The group had split by this point, and only Spartacus' half remained. Spartacus again chose to stay with his people who were now trapped. With no other choice, they turn north again and are caught between a closing triangle of 3 Roman armies. The results are exactly what you imagine they would be. After a brutal massacre, the surviving slaves were promised leniency in exchange for identifying the dead body or the living person of Spartacus. The real Spartacus may have died during the battle, but Kirk Douglas's version prepares to out himself, since none of his people will, even under threat of crucifixion. But his friends and followers love him too much to let him suffer the way that the man responsible for all this surely would, so they all stand up and famously begin shouting, "I'm Spartacus! No, I'm Spartacus!" So that even if Douglas outs himself, he is now just one of a whole crowd of people claiming to be him, with no way to determine who is the real Spartacus. So the Romans crucified the 6,000 survivors along the roadside all the way back to Rome. It's one of history's amazing true stories, and one of the most successful slave revolts ever recorded. But this particular film version has some aspects that are as relevant today as they were when it was made back in 1960. Like a good argument against the damage and degradation of today's widespread acceptance of porn. Weren't expecting that, were ya? There's a scene early on when Spartacus first meets Varinia. She's put in his cell after days training as a reward and to sire future generations of slaves. Spartacus is, shall we say, interested in this opportunity, as he somewhat sympathetically tells the naked Varinia, having lived as a slave for his entire life, he's never had a woman. But he becomes enraged when laughter alerts him to the fact that they are being watched. The guards taunt him as they watch for their own amusement. He ends up asserting his right to basic human dignity, yelling, "I am not an animal." Then he's confronted with Varinia's gentle assertion, "Neither am I." As Spartacus's own doubled standard hits him right between the eyes, he of course falls hopelessly in love with Varinia and hands her back her clothes. But the guards take her away and give her to somebody else. The next day, in the meal line, he risks breaking the rules to whisper a question to her. "Did he hurt you?" Varinia is stunned that this is where his thinking has led him. And needless to say, she is completely lost to him from this point as well. It's a perfect example of what it is to be a self-respecting man. I don't think anyone ever questioned the male dignity of the many characters Kirk Douglas played. Honor is something that is impossible to achieve while degrading others or oneself. And a truly honorable man will never need to demand respect. He'll already have it. And when he carries it within himself, he will find it reflected back from others automatically. And if you think the world has changed too much for that to still be true, then answer me this. Why is Outlander so popular? Why does every woman who sees that show fantasize about Jamie Fraser? Do 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 do. Oh yes. Guess we haven't changed as much as we like to think. A central love story is surprising in a plot line about a gladiator revolution, but It is as much at the heart of this film as the fight for freedom. In most cases, when a couple in a movie has really good chemistry, you either get electric heat or a sweet romance. In this performance, you get both, even at the same time. The heat itself is surprisingly tender, and the chemistry is truly unique. You see this beautifully in a scene during the heyday of the revolution when hopes are high. Spartacus is training new recruits and eventually looks for Varinia, who is bathing in a lake. She's happy and playing while trying to remember a poem that Tony Curtis quoted earlier, and she gets stuck on one of the lines. Spartacus, who has sat down to watch her, finally calls out the forgotten line and startles Varinia into a playful scene which ensues, with Spartacus tossing her in the air. But when she reveals that she is pregnant, he looks at her as though he's watching the universe being created before his very eyes. Then suddenly he's flooded with concern, apologizing for being too rough and worrying that she's cold. She has to remind him, "I'm the same as I always was, Spartacus. I won't break." Outside of the romance, you have an epic fight for freedom, swiveling from the slaves marching and fighting in open fields to the senators in Rome, where the brilliantly menacing Laurence Olivier provides the perfect counter-tension to Spartacus's character, with almost no scenes shot together. His creepy come-on to Tony Curtis will leave your skin crawling, and after the final battle, he recognizes Varinia and her newborn baby as the wife and child of Spartacus and has them taken to his home as slaves. He also recognizes his runaway slave, Tony Curtis, and deeply suspects that Kirk Douglas is Spartacus, so he has them saved until last to be crucified, so they can watch everyone else die. Then he forces them to fight to the death, gladiator style, where the loser dies and the winner will be crucified. Both men admire the other. The poet Tutor, that is Curtis's character, wants to be a glorious warrior like Spartacus, and the illiterate Spartacus believes, quote, "Any animal can learn to fight, but to say beautiful things and make people believe them." They each want to spare the other the more agonizing death of crucifixion, so the fight becomes real as they both try to kill the other in a final act of mercy. But Curtis is not a gladiator, and Spartacus kills him despite, quote, "loving him like the son he'll never see." Then Spartacus is crucified, after finding out that his wife and baby are slaves in the house of his sadistic enemy. Meanwhile, a Roman senator, played by Lawton, finds a loophole to free Varinia and her baby and smuggles them out of Rome as a parting jab to his old foe Olivier before committing suicide. Varinia and her escort, Ustinov, pretending to be her brother-in-law, are stopped at a checkpoint just outside the city where she sees Spartacus hanging from a cross, nearly dead. She goes to stand under him and shows him the baby. "This is your son. He is free, Spartacus. Free." Since crucifixion kills you by suffocation, he can no longer speak. In the end, she begs him to stop fighting and to, quote, "please, please die." Ustinov pulls her away as the scene begins to draw attention, and she's forced to abandon Spartacus to die alone. He watches her disappear over the horizon and dies at the end of a line of crosses stretching 1/3 the length of Italy. Tearjerker, I know. Why would I like a film that ended like that? Much less think of it as offering something positive. Well, there was a basic old understanding in old stories, one we refuse to accept today. The good don't always get a happy ending. When Iron Man falls from outer space, he dies. And there is no wormhole in time that always lets you take it back later. When you died in an old movie, you stayed dead. It was an acknowledgement of life's harsh realities. More than just acknowledging, in a way, it was embracing those realities. Because after all, they remain whether you look at them or not. And some stories just aren't the same without that. A Romeo and Juliet where they live isn't Romeo and Juliet. It's a completely different story. And to be honest, a far less compelling one. Teenagers from feuding families meet, fall in love, secretly marry, then he kills a cousin, is banished, and they run away together and live happily ever after. That's not what you sign up for with that story. Yet, so many old movies had brutally real endings that leave you longing for something sweeter. Yet we watch them over and over despite what we are signing up for. Why? It's more than just knowing that in the real world, good people don't always get a happy ending. The mere fact that it's real isn't the draw. We get all the reality we need in life. In stories, we want knights that overcome dragons and hobbits that make it through Mordor, and to believe Scarlet and Rhett will end up together even if we don't see it happen. But we come back to the stories that leave us unsatisfied in their end. Because deep down, we recognize a truth. Even if we don't acknowledge it with our heads, the good don't always get a happy ending. But the ending is just one day. They get a good life. Olivier's character is broken. He's cruel and sadistic. And although he lives in luxury with wealth and has all his power and status, he is entirely alone. He has nothing. Which is why he wants to find validation in making Varinia, who chose the great Spartacus, now choose him. But he's so broken that he thinks he can actually threaten her into loving him by implying that he will kill her baby unless she does. He is hated and despised by everyone who knows him. And he has absolutely nothing. Spartacus and Varinia lived laying in each other's arms in open fields under endless skies, drinking in life, curious about everything in the world, wanting to know where the wind comes from, and where the sun goes at night, and why the moon changes shapes. Most of all, they wanted what we all want. Not to live alone in our own head, but to truly know another human soul. Yes, in the end, Olivier won. But won what? He lived his life before and after that with nothing, despite his wealth and power, and even his victory. And Spartacus lost in the end, but that was just one day. All those other days, he had what Olivier could never buy or conquer his way into getting: a good life. It's summed up when Spartacus was asked, "Surely you know you're going to lose. If you could look into a magic crystal and see it, would you continue to fight, knowing that you must lose?" And Spartacus answered, "All men lose when they die, and all men die. But a slave and a free man lose different things. None of us controls our end. We don't control whether we get what we deserve or how much suffering we have to overcome along the way. But we can control if we live while we still have life, at least in the, quote, small things. And we can choose things that will make life a good one or a worse one. As Jordan Peterson said, just because a symphony ends doesn't mean it wasn't worth listening to. Now, movie night. Thank you for listening to this retroactive podcast, and I look forward to talking to you next week with My Favorite Things Part 2.